Welcome to Momentum's virtual training series, where we invite expert facilitators to share their knowledge on topics that advance women in leadership.
Our technology. We are in our new office and we're so excited about this. So Momentum Leaders has moved from our previous place where we were at Pepper Place, and now we're at our new building in Next Tech. And we're excited about this. So as you can tell, we have a new background and we also have new Wi-Fi. So we were trying to make sure all the technology was working great today. And we want to once again invite you to have your pens ready and be ready to take notes, because Vitale Hardin is in the house and she is a phenomenal speaker and she's very familiar with all of our audience. We're glad to have you here today, Vitale. We'd also like for you to, if I can get this to move forward, thank you. I want to thank our mentor of the month, Anne Marie Seibel. She is with Bradley, Arendt, Bolt, and Cummings, and she has been with Momentum for quite a while. And we want to thank you so much for what you do for mentoring and how you pour into so many women with us. We also want to thank our sponsors who work with us on all of our programs and how supportive not just the organizations are, but the women who are watching right now. And we thank you for all of that. If you're looking for a mentor or want to be a mentor, please reach out to us. You don't have to come through our program. And we are growing and excited about what our mentoring program is doing for women all across the board. Please go ahead and take a minute to scan the feedback survey right here, if you would. I'm going to go back to that. At the end of our talk today, we would like for you to fill out the feedback survey so that Vitale and us both can know what you're thinking, how we've been able to help you today. So I want to encourage you right now to go ahead and get that queued up. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that and be ready to answer as soon as we are finished today. I'm going to see if I can leave that up there a little bit longer. Thank you, everyone. If you've just come on, once again, we're with Vitale Hardin. She's going to be our guest today. And if you have not yet put your name in the chat, we would love for you to do that. And also let us know who you are with, what organization that you are with today. And also be prepared for our next few virtual trainings. We're doing virtual trainings twice a month now. And it is going really well. We had several sign up today, over 200. So we're excited about that. And I would love for us to go ahead and get you started here, Vitale. I don't want to waste another minute of your time. Thank you so much for being here with us.
I am excited to be here and talk about AI, but really most importantly, you all, the human side of AI. And just give me 2 seconds. All right, there we go. And a little bit about me, you all. I own a leadership consulting firm. I do a lot of work with Momentum. I love Momentum so much and their mission. And I get to partner with them on a lot of initiatives. A lot of you maybe have heard me talk in the past, and I do a lot of work on overcoming perfectionism in the workplace and also helping organizations drive performance through trust. But the main reason we're here today is how we really maintain our human authenticity alongside AI. And so I want to tell you kind of why this was of interest to me, and really how did I know I had a problem? So it was probably 8 months ago, last year, and I just, the pace of life, you all, is relentless. And I felt like I was moving from tab to tab, and I'm also a small business owner. And so my use of AI had become a little excessive. And I found that I was outsourcing so much of my thinking to AI that it was triggering my perfectionism, right? I was choosing AI's response over my own response. So it was even, disconnecting me from my intuition. I also found that it was just like AI was actually speeding up my life. And while it made my life more efficient, I didn't use that extra capacity for, deep thinking time. I just filled it with more tasks. And so when I think about AI, like when I was reflecting, I'm like, what has changed in my life? And I'm like, oh, it's AI, right? It's created more capacity, but we're not using that capacity intentionally. And it's causing cognitive fatigue. It's causing just cognitive even decline because we're not thinking as much for ourselves. And so those are the topics we're going to really talk about today. So when we think about AI, I love this quote, right? The best way to predict the future is to create it. This applies to any area of our lives. But as we're thinking about as leaders, teams, and organizations, like the way that we're going to win with AI is by coming up and being proactive with how we're going to approach it, coming up with our own use cases, coming up with our own boundaries with AI. So I want to talk about just AI adoption and some of the data. And a lot of us have heard, you all, that 90 to 95% of enterprise-wide AI initiatives have been unsuccessful. And so organizations are taking on all of these AI initiatives, but few of them are showing ROI. Also, I would say a third of nearly 40% or a third of the workforce only feel properly trained to use AI tools. If you see that kind of statistic in the bottom right. And so when I look at that, I actually see that as an opportunity to upskill our workforce, right? If only a third really feel, confident in the use of these tools, wow, as an organization, we can upskill them. Also, if you look at the statistic on the far left, right, 54% of workers are saying that they would use AI tools without formal approval. So these are people using it outside of approved use cases or what we call shadow use of AI. A third of people are actively working against their company's AI initiatives. And I think it's because we're not communicating clearly. There is a lot of fear around AI. People in fear of losing their jobs, people in fear of losing their autonomy, their sense of control and sense of purpose. And because of that, because we haven't communicated AI or our efforts around AI, people are actively working against it. And I think that this statistic will actually increase if we're not proactive in our communication around it. And again, I see this as an opportunity because what happens is employees are reading the news, right? That Oracle laid off 30,000 people, that Meta just laid off 8,000 and they were tracking their every move with AI. And so they read the news and they come to draw conclusions. So I also want to talk about you all, what's working with AI, what's not, and then we're going to talk about the productivity dilemma, and we're going to talk about how to avoid being AI average and really maintain our authenticity. So the organizations I've been talking to, it's like, okay, well, what is working with AI? Organizations are seeing a lot of real gains, and I would love to hear from you all in the chat box, like what is working for you? What I'm seeing is working is that there's faster research and synthesis of that research, the automation of repetitive tasks. A lot of people are starting to really leverage Copilot, faster problem solving because there's just faster information, increased productivity. Again, that increased capacity. A lot of like content and idea generation, but I would love to know, how you all are using it and the gains that you are seeing. AI helps you with tasks. Yeah, you're using Manus. Yeah, there are all these different tools. And I would say these are some of the most common use cases that I'm seeing in the organizations that I work with, but it's that idea of they're using it for productivity and efficiency, right? So they can pull from all these different document sources within the organization just by use of keywords, themes, instead of having to look in these individual places. It's helping with writing and content development, even coding assistance. The summarization of research and researching, it's helping with customer service. So I'd love to hear from you all, like what are the most common use cases within your organization or even within your team? Yep, ability to quickly perform basic reviews, writing and content and summarization. Yep, if you all want to keep on including that, that would be great. Yep, research, letters of support. Yeah, filtering through data, softening an email. Yeah, I do that a lot. I'm like, okay, can you please make this email warm and direct, kind and direct. Yep, creating templates, using Copilot to perform data analysis. Love that. Yep, asking right questions. So I've also found while they're the most common use cases and organizations are seeing real gains, organizations are also struggling with different things. So unclear use cases. So maybe a team has developed their kind of governance and use case, but maybe the organization as a whole still hasn't kind of gotten in front of that. And, again, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So I found that consistently there are unclear use cases in organizations. There's a lack of real governance around AI just because everything is constantly changing. There's employee resistance because we're not communicating. So that can be something that organizations are struggling with. The shadow use of AI, so people using it outside of use cases, right? They're not allowed to use ChatGPT when they're at work, so they're bringing work home and they're doing it there on their home computer. So a lot of shadow use of AI. The over-reliance on AI outputs. So there was a data point that said like 52% of people are producing AI slop, which is this idea that you're asking AI, you're just not reading through it. You're not actually using your brain to think about like, is what they're saying the point that I'm trying to make? So they're calling it AI slop, right? We're just kind of in a hurry. And when I think about the reasons for AI slop, it's really not me wanting to blame the person. I think about the systems within the workplace that are causing people to produce that kind of work, you all. And if I think about AI slop, there are three kind of root issues of that. And I would say the first is that people are overloaded with work, right? People do not have time in the day to get their work done. And so if they can use AI to create something quickly and then they just push it out, they're going to. So I'd say that is one of the root causes of AI slop. Another is people are disengaged, right? There are a lot of people that are just disengaged. So they're doing it, they're passing it along, they're just not connected to their work in the way that they used to. And then the third way is that there's just unclear use cases. We're not telling people how and when and why to use AI and how to use it effectively. So instead of blaming the person, if AI slop is something that you are experiencing in the workplace, I would try and get to the root cause of that, right? Is it that people are just overloaded with work and they don't have time? Are they disengaged? Or do we need to be more clear with our use cases? So thinking about that. Now, also, excuse me, I'm going too fast. Also think about when you are rolling out an initiative, and I could do a whole training on this one slide, but I just want to cover this quickly. Like the reason people are maybe pushing against AI is that we're not thinking about these three things. And so when it comes to AI adoption and AI integration and AI rollout, you all employees are going to evaluate this through these kind of three psychological needs, right? This idea of like psychological safety and trust. Do they feel safe? And so these three C's are how, employees are kind of evaluating AI adoption. The first is competence, right? Do I still have value here? Like, is AI going to take away the value that I add? So people are afraid of that. So we've got to address that issue, or they're going to push back against the AI initiatives. Also, control. People want to feel autonomous, right? They want to know that they still have agency and autonomy over their work. And if they think AI is going to take that away from them, if we haven't communicated that, again, they are going to push back. And then finally, this idea of connection. Do I still feel connected and have purpose with the work that I'm doing? And so as you are rolling out your AI initiatives and really working on getting AI adoption, these three things are something I would really think about addressing in some way, shape, or form. Again, I could do a whole other training, maybe Darla will let me, on these three things and how we address them. But I just wanted to cover that because when those needs are threatened, your resistance is going to increase. So something to think about as you're rolling out your AI initiatives. So I love this little graphic. If any of you have ever seen my training, you know that I do this little graphic a lot. No AI strategy versus an AI strategy. So most organizations are in this car on the left, no clear use case. They're kind of experimenting, one department's experimenting with this, the IT department is doing something else. There's no communication internally, and it is not fun to be in that car. We want to really move to the car on the right. And so we're going to talk about how we approach AI today so that we're living with Kermit. That is the goal. Now, there are three levels, you all, of AI adoption. So when we think about what AI looks like on the three different levels, just to kind of give you a big picture, level one is like the individual ownership of AI use. Level two is that kind of team integration of AI. And then level three is the organizational transformation of AI adoption. And so we're really going to focus on individual ownership today, team integration and organizational transformation, right? You have to be able to really own level one before you move to level two and before you move to level three. When I'm training this work in teams and we're doing more in-depth work, Most people think they're at level 2, the team integration of AI, but they're actually still kind of at level 1 or maybe in between level 1 and level 2. And so what we do is we help organizations move through those levels on the human side of AI, addressing those 3 C's that I talked about so that your AI initiatives have a higher percentage of success. So again, that individual ownership is, again, individuals are using that AI to improve efficiency, decision-making, their productivity. It's integrated into their daily workflows. The employees are experimenting with prompts and just different tools. And these employees are feeling more confidence in their tools and the responsible use of AI. And then when you're talking about team integration, this is kind of team governance, team use cases around AI. They're using it collaboratively, like across departments. So not even just in one team, but across teams it's being used. They're using it for their meetings and brainstorming and documentation. So again, there's this collaborative approach to AI. And then on the big scale, right, this organizational transformation level, this is when it's embedded into your strategies and your operations and your culture and your leadership expectations. You have really clear use cases. You have really clear governance. You're talking about it. You're building trust alongside AI. You're communicating effectively internally so that people aren't afraid that AI is going to replace them. Or if AI is in fact going to replace them eventually, there are communication around that. I mean, just being as transparent as you can be. So I'd love to know in the comments, which level are you at in your organization, your team? Would love to just hear more about that. And also at any time you can raise your hand. I'm happy to answer questions, comments. I also love when we have a real conversation instead of just chat communication. So I'm available for that too. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, you're at 1.5. So that's where I'm finding most people. They're at the 1, kind of 1.5, or maybe even half, 0.5. Yep. Karen 1, Tiki 1, 1.5. Yep. Amanda, rock it out. You're at level 2. Get it?
I love what Jennifer said. They're creeping
Yeah,
into
they're
level
creeping into
2.
level 2. It's amazing.
That was us. We just wanted to make sure before we were integrating a lot of things that everyone knew how to use it,
Yeah.
as well as understanding how to troubleshoot it as well, Vitale, because knowing what it is, but also how to fix it if something goes wrong, I believe is something that a lot of people get a little anxious about as well.
Totally. Thank you all for adding all that. Yeah. So by and large, most people are at level 1. Some are creeping into level 2. I really loved how we put that. So thank you. So I'm going to talk today about the productivity dilemma, and then we're going to spend the majority of our time on how to avoid being AI average. So how do we maintain our originality, our authenticity alongside AI? How do we encourage our team members to do that as well? So the productivity dilemma is this idea that, like, more productive for what? So I was talking to a hospital CEO a few months ago, and I was like, okay, well, tell me about your use of AI, and not the clinical use of AI, but I'm like, what about the hospital leadership team? How are you all using AI? And he's like, well, we're still experimenting with it on that case, right? The clinical use, we've really done a lot of adoption around that. There's clear use cases. We're really experimenting with it. He was like, but administratively, it's really about me being more productive. And I said, okay, well, I just posed a question. I was like, more productive for what? Right? Because the faster we move, the less space we have for our humanness. Right? The less space we have for thinking, brainstorming, innovating, problem solving. So that's when I knew I had a problem last year, because I had no space. It was like meeting after meeting, AI output after AI output. I had no space to think, right? To make decisions, to, use critical judgment. So, AI, yes, is increasing our speed, but leadership requires judgment. And judgment requires space. And so as organizations, how are we solving for this? How are we creating space for people to have space to think? Right? And there's also a difference between deep focus time and recovery time, right? And both are actually needed within the work week. And right now, most people have neither. I was reading an article by the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And the headline was, I have meeting fatigue, and now I have boundaries around my schedule. This is the CEO of Southwest Airlines, and he was saying, I have meeting fatigue, and so now I've blocked off my calendar Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoons, and no meetings are allowed. And I'm like, A, I'm shocked that you haven't done that before. B, how privileged of you because you're the CEO. And C, like, what are you doing to encourage that with all of your leaders and pushing that same way of thinking down? Because it's actually all your other leaders that honestly need it more than he does, right? That space to think. So as leaders, how are we creating this space? How do we experiment with this space? A client of mine decided in 2026 that they were going to experiment with no meeting Friday. So no meetings allowed on Friday. That's the rule. Now there are exceptions. And so it's an opportunity for the leaders to wrap up their week and also get ready for the week ahead. So that is a way that they're experimenting with kind of creating space for people. And so there's all ways that you can do it, right? There's other organizations that have rules on, the second and fourth Wednesday of the month, right? That would be a little confusing for me. I think no meeting Friday is a little easier, but how are we creating space for people to think? Because while we're seeing faster output and faster research, and again, faster, we need space to think, to challenge our assumptions, to connect ideas, to have meaningful conversations with people, to make thoughtful decisions. And we're losing that space if we don't have it. And yeah, Jennifer, I'm reading your comment. Yeah, the 80s commercial. Yeah. So yes, in a different way, we're in the same way of thinking, most definitely. And so how are we really dealing with this productivity dilemma so that, yes, AI is increasing our capacity, but what are we actually intentionally doing to use that space that we're given better? And in fact, there's a really effective question that I like to pose to leaders where, okay, let's say in, 3 years, AI creates 50% more capacity within your workforce, but you're not allowed, but you have to keep all of your headcount. So you can't let anyone go, right? AI has created 50% more capacity, but you cannot fire anyone. You cannot lay anyone off. What would be possible for your company? And so that's how we really need to be thinking about AI is like, what's possible? Like as an organization, would you go after a new service? Would you create a new product? If you had to keep your head count, but you had more capacity, would you create more space in people's day so that you were just this kind of human thinking machine alongside AI? The organizations that are going to get ahead in the future are the ones that maximize and use space to their advantage. Because I would argue that the ROI of space will eventually be more effective than the ROI of productivity. So just a little food for thought, a little TED talk on that. But I would argue that the ROI of space is going to be higher than the ROI of productivity, right? The space to be human, the space to use our critical thinking, the space to make decisions. And so again, I'd love if anyone wants to unmute, give me their comments. If you want to include them in the chat box, that would be great too. Also, I'd love to have a conversation around this. But again, this idea of productivity. So I just wanted to touch on this because I think it's a really important concept to talk about because the world is moving at a relentless pace. And again, it removes that space to think and be effective. And decision making, I would say, is one of the most important skills leaders have, right? Being an effective decision maker. And that requires space. When we are going meeting after meeting after meeting, we are not as effective of a decision maker. So again, just the idea of productivity, be thinking, how do I address this within my team? How can I experiment with it, right? Can we do the third Thursday of the month, right? Just start with a small time block. Right? Experiment with something, just pilot it, right? Maybe pilot it for the summer and just experiment, see how it goes, right? You don't have to commit to it forever. So I also want to talk about the risk of being AI average. And this is a term that I coined that really talks about us all sounding the same if we start outsourcing too much of our thinking to AI. And so how did I know I had a problem with this? So I live in Kentucky. I'm from Alabama. I live in Kentucky now, and one of my good friends lives in Costa Rica. She plans retreats for people and is just living the life in Costa Rica. Anyway, in January, we came together and we were doing some kind of planning and goal setting for our year ahead for 2026. And I'd come up with 5 questions for us. And so I sent her the 5 questions and we got together like a week later. And each of us unknowingly had processed our questions through AI, right? Each individually asking, hey, AI, you know me really well, Chatty, like, how would you respond to these questions? And when we got back together, again, neither of us knew that we did this. You all, our answers were nearly the same. They were nearly the same. Like so many of the same keywords were used, and we are very different people. So many of the same keywords were used. And for me, there was this moment where I was like, wow, I'm in Kentucky, she's in Costa Rica, and we sound the same. And it was a step back of like, I need to stop outsourcing so much of my thinking to AI and my approach to AI. So the idea of AI average is this kind of drift that happens when leaders and organizations start outsourcing too much of our thinking. And we start outsourcing too much of our thinking because we're strapped for time, right? We have low capacity for extra things. And so when AI can move 1,000,000 miles an hour and it helps us, we start becoming reliant on that. So at the same time, I found this book, and you all, it's incredible, on how not to use AI. And it's really about how you move from AI dependency to AI partnership. So how do you become a partner with AI instead of dependent on AI? And this book is really powerful. Plus, the name of the title of it really was intriguing to me. And so it's really thoughtful in terms of, Jennifer, sorry, I'm reading your comment. I feel like thinking on those lines is so empowering. Yeah, to have the capacity to dream on projects. Yeah. So again, how do we have more capacity? So this book, How Not to Use AI, really changed my entire approach to AI and how I interact with AI. And so I'm going to share some of the principles and use cases and prompts with you all so that we can change our relationship with AI and become an AI partner instead of an AI dependent. So what happens if we rely too much on AI, you all, and we have this kind of AI dependency, is we become AI average because we're thinking and sounding like everyone else. Like even think about your emails, right? My emails are AI is constantly suggesting that I be more succinct and that I use different words. And it will suggest words that, I am in my 40s that I have never once used. And I'm like, I've gotten this far and I've had this much success in this life. I'm going to just kind of trust my own voice and how I word emails. But that's also where perfectionism can get in the way, right? We're like, well, AI sounds so much more perfect than me. So again, just relying on our original thinking and sounding like ourselves instead of all sounding the same. Also, what happens when we become dependent on AI is our original thinking starts atrophying, right? We have less of our original thinking and more AI thinking. Also, our creative confidence starts eroding because we are looking at AI to generate ideas for us instead of going in within. Our dependency increases. Our voice starts becoming generic. Again, everyone's using these same models. Doesn't matter if we're in different parts of the world. We have the same voice. And when we optimize for better outputs, we actually optimize away our authenticity and our uniqueness. So these are just things to think about when it comes to AI dependency. And so there's two kind of the best functions and use of AI are using it for its collective intelligence and its pattern recognition. But we're not using it in that way. Right now, we're using it as our magic 8-ball, right? You're like shaking it, you're like, hey, give me the answer. What decision should I make? And so instead of using it as our magic 8-ball, we need to use it for its collective intelligence. So always approaching AI with our own thought first, our own draft first. So instead of asking it to generate, we need to listen. And I'm going to give you some examples about that. Right now, a lot of us are using it as an extraction tool, meaning we say like, hey, can you write copy for this social media post? It sends it, we copy paste, instead of using it for its best and highest use, which again is pattern recognition and its collective intelligence, right? If we can start listening to AI instead of extracting from AI, that's where we become an AI partner instead of an AI dependent. Meaning, instead of just saying, hey, draft this social media post, you could say, hey, What are the patterns? What are, you think about your target audience. You could say, hey, what is my target audience really most concerned with right now? Pull from Reddit threads, pull from these, online forums. Like, I want to hear what's really going on with my target audience. And then you can craft your message from there and even ask AI to refine it, but use it as a listening tool. And instead of asking it for all the answers, again, reconnecting with your intuition. So this is a really powerful way and reframe of using AI. And just thinking like, right, where in our organizations or teams may we be drifting toward AI average? So not something to get critical about, but just something to start thinking about. Now, we want to, again, approach AI as a listening tool instead of an extraction tool. And so let me give you an example of the power of listening. And I think as humans, this goes beyond AI. There's so much power in listening to each other, to our colleagues, right? Instead of just rolling out an initiative for our employees, like listen to the employees first. But so many people create before they listen. And so it was interesting as I was reading this book on how not to use AI and the power of using it as a listening tool, I realized like, wow, I think listening is really this kind of long lost strength or tool that we had, and we're not listening as much, and it's because there's not as much time in the day. And I'd love to just have your thoughts on this in general as we talk about it. But I want to talk about the power of listening. So this woman is Melanie. She is one of the co-founders of Canva. And I think a lot of you know what Canva is, right? It's a tool that allows you to create marketing pieces with ease. And it's really, really powerful, whether you're own your own business, corporate, whatever it is, it's really powerful. You can generate brochures and social media post images, and it's a really powerful tool. Now, when Melanie was launching this, she was going to a bunch of venture capital firms and she was pitching her idea. And she got 100 no's. And they kept on telling her, hey, I want you to be more like Adobe, right? Like be more like Adobe. And she was like, no, I've listened to my target audience, and my target audience is frustrated with the difficulty in creating simple social media templates. And so I want to create for them. I don't want to create and be more like Adobe. And so they launched in their first year for their audience, and they had like 10 templates. That was it for social media. That is how Canva launched. And it was from listening to their target audience. After that, they listened more. And year 2, they were profitable. Year 5, valued at 1 billion. Year 10, they are now valued at 40 billion. They're still profitable, and they have 150 million users. And this is all because they listened. And so this is how we should start approaching AI and even just the workplace in general. And so while she was listening, there were also other companies that weren't listening. They were creating products that they thought people needed. They weren't actually asking the people what they needed. And so there was this company called Envision. They raised over $350 million across 10 different rounds of venture capital fundraising. And then they shut down their operation in 25 because they didn't listen. Another company raised 19 million and then sold later for parts to Adobe because they didn't listen. They just created. Another raised 41 million and struggled to find profitability. So again, the power of listening can be applied to so many different areas in our life. And there's different companies, ones that listened first, and then there's ones that built first, generated first. And so when you look at Canva, when you look at Patagonia, those are companies that listened first. And then when you look at companies that generated first, right? WeWork ended up shutting down. This other company, again, they had use cases that nobody wanted to use, even though they raised a ton of money and had a good selling story and case. So I love this chart, and I would suggest this is a good one maybe to take a picture of with your phone. But this is the difference between Silicon first results, and I use Silicon because Silicon Valley created AI. So let's just say AI first results versus soul first, human first results. So we often think that AI is going to save us time, and I would love to hear your feedback of this, but I think we've all probably experienced this. We ask AI to create something for us, but it's not exactly what we need. And so we go back and forth with AI, right? Like, yes, it creates what we want in 5 minutes, like less than 5 minutes, but we find the one, but then we go back and forth on which output to use for 30 minutes, right? We can, because it's like, oh, do you want me to sharpen this story? Or, hey, I can make it better this way. And so again, it's built to be addictive so that we continue to use it. Now, when we just do human first, the ideation time might be 20 minutes, but we know exactly what to write and it's clear. And so in the end, actually, the human first approach takes 20 minutes and the ideation time and choosing which output to use actually ends up taking 30 minutes, so more time. And I have found this to be true when I'm using AI versus approaching it myself. Also, if you think about quality, when it's AI first, yes, it's technically correct, but it's soulless, right? Sometimes it can be even meaningless, right? There's a sentence and we're like, that sounds good, but like, what is it even saying? And we think about human first results, the quality it's our unique perspective and often resonates much more than the quality of the silicone first results. But what happens is our perfectionism gets in the way, right? We think, oh, well, AI is using better words and this sounds catchier and AI knows better than me. And you know better than AI. Again, use it as a listening tool to collect data, to refine it, ask it what you're missing from something that you're working on. But again, you know better. And then think about team morale, right? When we're doing AI first, again, those 3 C's, right? People are like, are we even needed? Right? Do I even add value anymore? Whereas, and if it's human first, they're like, oh, this is why we're here because we're partnering with AI instead of being dependent on AI. Also, there's very little differentiation when it comes to AI first approaches, whereas there's much more differentiation because a human created it, right? So it's almost impossible to replicate. You think about the difference in customer response and even the difference in long-term value. So I would love to just hear from you all in the comments. Is this something you're seeing? Are these patterns that you recognize? The AI first versus kind of this human first approach. So I'd love to just hear if this is something you are seeing in the workplace and in your use of AI. Also, just change your prompting. Right? When you have a generic prompt, you get a generic answer. And today is not a workshop on how to prompt, but how to be a better listener with AI so that you get better results and partner better with AI. Right? If you have commanding prompts like, hey, create this, instead have listening prompts, and I'm going to show you what those look like. So again, less command and more exploration, which again takes time, but the result is so much better. So instead of like, what should I write? Be like, here's what I'm thinking. What patterns do you recognize? What is my audience that I'm speaking to? What are they struggling with the most? What points do I need to make sure I'm addressing? Instead of like, give me ideas, change to like, here are my ideas. Like, what am I missing here? Instead of create this for me and say, hey, here's my first draft. Can you help me refine what I've created? What am I missing? Instead of think for me, it's really, again, think with me so that it's a partner. Now, I want to just kind of give you some different ideas of thoughtful prompting, thoughtful listening prompts, and also some use cases to think about. So I love this prompt and I've used it a lot in my thinking of how I approach my different audiences, my clients. And so this is also a good one to take a picture of. And you can use this when you're trying to craft messaging, whether it's for your internal audience, like the employees, your team, or an external audience. So for example, I do a lot of work in healthcare. So let's just say you are the collective voice of hospital CEOs I do a lot of work in workplace trust. So engaging with workplace trust. Channel their authentic experience, right? Reveal the public narrative they present to the world, the private reality they discuss with their peers, the behavioral truth of how they actually engage, the hidden pressures affecting their choices, and the emotional core beneath their decisions. The results that I got from this prompt were so powerful. And I was able to create content around it, really speak to these points, even educate myself more as I listened to it instead of asking it to generate for me, right? Again, when we're co-creating versus asking it to create. And when we think about innovation, this is something just to think about, right? Breakthrough thinking does not happen when we're kind of in our own kind of mind and in our own perspective, right? to some degree imprisoned by our own expertise, right? We treat AI like a more sophisticated version of our thinking. And by default, we're feeding it constraints because there are ideas in our parameters. So we're not able to think outside the box. And you all, breakthrough thinking never has worked this way. So for example, the Wright brothers, they didn't solve flight by studying failed aircraft. They actually solved flight because they looked at bicycle balance patterns. So how do we get outside of our own perspective? And so it's not by asking for answers, it's by listening. So here's a really cool example use case for sales. So if you're in sales, these are different ways you could listen, right? So create an ideal, instead of using like create ideal customer profile for CMOs at Fortune 500 companies, if you are selling something, so in this example, this sales company is selling MarTech platforms. So, hey, create a vessel channeling how real Fortune 500 chief marketing officers are navigating buying MarTech platforms. Include the contradictory patterns from Reddit threads, LinkedIn discussions, and review sites. So again, just being more creative with our prompts. The book on how not to use AI has a lot of these really interesting case studies. Another is customer service departments. So instead of customer service teams saying, hey, how do I resolve this customer complaint quickly, efficiently, effectively? They actually worked with a customer service department to create better prompting. So for example, how do I restore this person's dignity after our system failed them? And the responses that they got were so effective, and their ability to resolve complaints were so effective that complaint escalation dropped by 60%, which is huge, you all. And it's because they used AI as a listening tool, right? Customers even left reviews saying that they felt seen as humans and not ticket numbers. And you all, that hardly ever happens when it comes to customer service departments and that kind of interaction. And so there's just so many ways that this can be used. And customer service, I think this is really, really powerful. Another is looking at kind of data analysis. So yes, AI can analyze data for us, but it can't tell us the human stories, right? So it can really talk about the quantitative data, but it can't talk about the qualitative data. So there was this woman, she was working with this retail business, and she was looking at all the data that was AI generated and all the patterns that AI had shown. And she was like, and she even said like, she said, well, sorry, if you look at the data, you need stories. So she asked the retailer, because she noticed when she looked at the data, she was like, oh, a lot of your users are online at like 2 and 3 a.m. Why? And he responded and he said, I don't know. And she was like, well, I want you to call some of them. And he was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I want you to get their stories. I want you to listen to them. I want you to understand why you have users on at 2 and 3 a.m. on your retail site. And so we called a few. And one of the stories was that it was a mom of an autistic son. And she was on the site at 2 a.m. because that was the only time she had to herself, right? Her son did not go to sleep until 1 a.m. And so 2 a.m. was her time for herself. And so because of similar patterns that he found and similar stories like that, they changed their entire approach to their retail site. They changed the wording to make it less pressure-based, like, hey, you're here, take your time. They added the function where you can save the items in your cart so they can leave the site and they come back and their cart is still saved, so no pressure buying. And sales increased by 20%. So again, this data, AI can help us, but then listening and adding it for listening can make it even more effective. And so food for thought, right? AI is a radio. And so we are literally tuning that radio with the questions that we ask it. And so it's the same radio, but different stations. And so when we're asking it to be our magic 8-ball, we get a different answer than we ask it for its use of collective intelligence and its pattern recognition. And all in all, you all, listening ends up becoming our competitive advantage with AI, because we're asking it to give us patterns that it's seeing with our target audience or with our employee base instead of just reporting results. And again, we stop using AI for this kind of control and certainty and our magic 8-ball, like really reconnecting with our intuition. Also, just remembering that our authentic voice is the only real differentiator. And when we overuse AI, we create this distance between ourselves and our authentic voice. Another rule of thumb is that we should always develop our own opinion first, our own intelligence before adding AI. That doesn't mean that we're not allowed to change our mind, but we want to start with our own thoughts first. And again, we want to engage AI as a medium for exploration versus extraction. So we talked earlier about this idea of productivity and this idea of AI average. And I've got some other things for us to think about, but I would love to hear from you all. Remember, there's the three kind of stages of AI integration: the individual integration, the kind of team ownership, and then the organizational transformation. And we have to really get really good at the individual ownership to move into team ownership, to move into organizational transformation. But I'd love to hear, just unmute yourself for us to have some conversation if you're willing and brave. Spice up the conversation. I'd love to just hear from you all, like, what's resonating now as we're talking about using AI as a listening tool instead of an extraction tool, how we create space so that we can, really amplify our humanness, which is our ability to use our judgment, our ability to use our critical thinking, our innovation, our problem solving. So I'd love to just hear in the chat box, or even unmute yourself, like, what's coming up for you?
Vitale, I'm going to just speak
Okay.
it's a very simple, it's much more simple than what you were even
Yeah.
talking about. So I went to my AI and I said, I have these 4 tasks to do. And I named them and I went into deep detail. And I said, what can you help me do? And what would be best for me to do? And its reply was actually, you do your writing because you need to use your own voice. I'll
Right.
handle these other tasks. And I thought, I kind of laughed because I thought that's exactly what I want
Yeah.
us to learn how to do. But I just thought it was just interesting that AI even came back and said, you do the writing and you write your content. I'll handle these three tasks and make it easier for you.
Yeah.
And that's just something very simple. Even if you have a to-do list,
Right.
I need you to be my organizer. Help me to prioritize. I
Right.
have 3 hours. What do you think would be the best task for what I have to do today?
Yeah.
Just something that simple.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. I
I
love that.
Thank you for your examples too. Those are
Yeah.
very, very good.
And, you all, one of my favorite quotes in how I approach culture change and leadership development and all of that is by James Clear. And it's that goals are for people who care about winning once, systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly. And I want you all to win repeatedly with AI. I want you to win repeatedly with trust in the workplace and all initiatives. And so it really comes down to, like, what are the systems? When you think about the productivity dilemma, like, what system do we need to put in place so that we create space for people's humanness to be amplified? How do we create systems in place so that our people don't become AI average, that the company's voice doesn't become AI average, that our ideas within our company walls don't become AI average? How do we create systems? And systems are created when we have clear governance and use cases, when we equip people with the right training and right tools and right, again, use cases. With productivity, it's about thinking about the system. Can we experiment with, the third Thursday of every month, there's no meetings? Or even say, hey, in the summer, we're going to experiment with no meeting Fridays, right? Just during the summer. So those are systems thinking, problem solving. All right, going back down to the system. And also, again, most of you know me on this call as the perfectionism researcher and expert. And so in terms of perfectionism, remember that you know best, right? You're in your role for a reason. You have your experiences and your role and your responsibilities for a reason. And so, yes, use AI for information and collective intelligence and pattern recognition, but also make sure you're consulting yourself and really maintaining your intuition, because it is so easy to start getting further and further away from that and letting that go. Amy, yeah, I love that. Used it for coaching and performance reviews to help me target my comments and feedback that resonated based on individual communication style. Yep, that's right. So you could spend more time talking with your team member. And I think that that's a really effective use. And I do the same thing. I think about, hey, these are the things that I want to say, right? This is how my employee is doing, and these are the things that I want to convey. what's the best way to communicate that effectively, making sure that you review it, that it sounds like you, it's your voice, and it's conveying what you want to convey. And then, yes, you can spend more time with your team members talking it through than all the time like stressing with how it's worded and again, it being perfect. So what are some,
I will,
oh, yes, go ahead,
can,
Adrian. Yes.
okay. I will say that, when you talk about moving from one stage to the other, I'm
Yeah.
definitely in stage one. I have
Yeah.
a few successes using AI that are small, but they were hurdles for me. I
Okay.
think that people don't really appreciate that for the people in that first that first tier,
Yeah.
it is so time consuming.
Yeah.
And the learning curve is so steep sometimes in order to use it and be confident in what the output is,
Yes.
that it's almost takes more time than just doing it yourself the old way. And
Yeah.
so I hope that I think that in the early stages somebody should really, well, not somebody, but people should maybe use the free time they do create to just explore more, like maybe not be off on a day, but to think about AI on a specific day and feel okay about just doing that, because
Yeah.
it takes so much time for me to kind of generate what I think is something that's presentable.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the dilemma when I'm trying to move from one stage to the next.
Yes, Adrian, thank you for sharing that. And that's again, a systems thing. Like, I love that you brought, like, we should have like an AI thinking day. Like, imagine if in the beginning you're like, okay, the third Thursday of every month, we are dedicating to AI experimentation. And here are the different tools. And I want you all to experiment. And we're going to, explore this and pilot it. And so, yeah, I love that you shared that.
Okay.
Also, go ahead, Adrian, were you going to say something else?
No, I'm just listening.
Yeah. Another thing that concerns me is AI can remove the friction that is really important to us learning. Meaning, when people are new to a role, new to an industry, there's just this natural, friction that happens when we're learning. And AI can remove that. So, for example, you all, I remember my first job, 22. I was an account assistant at a PR firm. And I remember the CEO of the company came to me and he was like, Vitale, I need you to write an op-ed for the CEO of the water company. And I'm 22. I'm like, what is an op-ed? Even though I went to school for public relations, I don't even know what you're talking about. What is an op-ed? And then what does the CEO of the water company do? I mean, I was just starting to pay my, utilities. And I had no AI to say, hey, can you write this op-ed for me? I had to dig in the database of all the different op-eds that the company had written over the years. I had to do research on the water company. I had to like really think about it and definitely be scared of presenting the first draft to my boss. But there was a natural friction and learning that got me, to where I am today ultimately. And so for me too, I think we need to think about like, how do we also preserve some of that friction for people to learn, because it's really, really important. And so again, there's the human side of that we need to be thinking about as well. That's really important to people's learning abilities and skills. So I'd love to hear comments. So just a
Vital.
reminder that listening, oh, does anyone want to share? Yes, Ebony.
Hey there, it's Andrea. I was going to say
Oh,
something a
Andrea.
little bit ago, but I
Yes.
found that this is probably weird for me, but I found that when I start talking through my thoughts versus typing it,
Yes.
when you were going back earlier about getting to your authentic voice, I've started learning that if I'm talking rather than typing, it forces me to really communicate the way I normally do versus typing it. And so I find that I'm talking to myself a lot now or talking to the computer a lot, but it feels
Yes.
it feels better for me to do it that way.
Yes, Andrea, thank you for bringing that up. That is actually one of the biggest recommendations in the How Not to Use AI book is like walk around, because when you're talking to it, your stream of consciousness comes out versus a prepared response. And so yes, talking to it can be really, really powerful. Ebony, did you want to share? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? There was a hand raised. If you want to share, unmute yourself. If not, there's a few other things I'm going to share, but feel free to interrupt me. Um, So again, like, what does this mean for companies? What does this mean for teams? Again, identify your use cases. I would experiment with no meeting Fridays this summer. I would experiment with an AI day each month for experimentation. Adrian, I love that. Again, rethink the purpose of your entry-level roles. Like, how do we maintain that friction? Or even people that are very experienced but new to an industry, because there's an impact to your talent pipeline when we remove that friction. Really think about being a learning culture instead of a knowing culture. Perfectionism promotes a knowing culture. How do we focus on cultivating our power skills, right? Those power skills, the human amplification is the critical thinking, judgment, decision-making. These are our power skills, and we do this better than AI. And then also, how do you create a culture of trust while you're rolling these things out, right? How do you address those 3 C's so that employees stop resisting AI and are more open to adoption? And so these are the things that we have been working with organizations with, not specific AI tools, but how do we amplify the humanness? How do we create systems for humanness to be amplified alongside the AI adoption? How do we build a culture of trust? And for those of you who know me, you know that I end every single training with one day or day one, right? The quote that we started with was, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so you have a choice today. We can put our head in the sand and say, oh, I'm going to look at this one day, or you can make today your day one. And so I invite you to make today your day one. I have some leadership questions that I've put together to help you start thinking about your AI strategy if you want to do the QR code, or if you even want to continue this conversation. And I'd love to just hear favorite takeaways, things you've learned. Like Amanda or Andrea sharing that she speaks to it. Adrian, I love what you shared, but would love to hear any takeaways, something new that you learned today that you're going to take with you and make your day one. Anyone want to share in the comments or unmute themselves? Yep, Donna. Yep. Go ahead, Darla.
Oh, no, you go ahead. It's just said Donna
Yeah.
was saying it was very helpful information about asking the correct and appropriate prompts. And that's what I had iterated to you earlier. Thank you so much for, giving us some suggestions of how to ask better questions. I think that also helps our intelligence because we have to think it through. I love what you were saying about the friction of the learning curve. I think we get embarrassed and we want to come across as perfect all the time. And yet, like you said, that is what helps shape you and helps you to develop your skills and to be quicker at knowing how to do things when you have that friction of, here, you fix this, or it is your turn, or you need to find this out yourself. Thanks for reminding us of that beauty of the imperfection that makes us how awesome each of us are at what we're doing. It makes us valuable beyond the computer system.
It does. It does. And we know best, and we know ourselves best. So yeah, Dara, thank you so much. Thank you to Momentum for giving me the time today. I really appreciate all your engagement, you all, and thank you for listening and taking an hour out of your day, especially on a four-day work week, to talk about this issue. So thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. Oh, Vitale, thank you for being here with us. I want to share.
Virtual trainings are made possible with the support of Protective Life, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, and America's Thrift. Find the full list of sponsors as well as additional resources for women leaders on our website at momentumleaders.org. Thanks for taking the time to invest in you, and remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. We love reading thoughts and comments, so you can leave those for us here too. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn